hold Jaja children no more. No Babylon. You can't hold Jaja children no more. No matter how hard you try, oh Babylon. So you can't hold Jaja children no more. No Babylon. You can't hold Jaja children no more. No Babylon. So you can't hold Jaja children no more. No Babylon. You can't hold Jaja children no more. That I'm saying, rewrite history if you have to. I'm saying, you may fool a man and still won't get the fool of you. Lord, cause the truth is truth and it just can't change. The truth just can't change. Do you think you could have bound us in your mental chain? No Babylon, oh Babylon. You can't hold your children no more. Oh Babylon. You can't hold your children no more. Even though you try, oh Babylon. So you can't hold your children no more. No Babylon. You can't hold your children no more. Yeah. Say you cheat the poor and you rob the blind. Yes, you did. We are the scars you slavery left behind. Now you're coming with another psychological game. Oh, yes. Oh, your faces change, but you're still the same. Well, now.
All right, folks, those of you already in Facebook land and YouTube land, a special greetings, a special welcome to you right here. It's already 5 minutes past the good old hour of 6 o'clock here, this 26th day of March, 2023. And that is where we want to make a start this evening for yet another very interesting program on the Civic Vibes platform on social media. So again, a special good evening to all of you already locked into the live here. Please, as we ask, as we go around this evening, as we go along rather this evening, we ask of you to share the information, share the live, share the discussion so that other persons as well can participate in what is about to go down here this evening. Without further ado, let me move across to Brother Alvin Thomas so that he can say his hi and hello and opening remarks to you guys out there. Alvin, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Lofty. Thank you again. Thank you. Yet another Civic Vice Sunday program. And again, always a pleasure to be in your company and as well to be in the company of our dear friend from Antigua, Brother Ralston Jeffrey. So a pleasant good afternoon to all our many fans who have been logged in, waiting. And, Lofty, I mean, when I look, I'm just looking at the Facebook page briefly, and you see the number of persons that are already logged in. That, I think, gives us hope. Hope in the sense that there are persons who want to see a difference in their country, who want to take action and see something happen. So that is hope. I'm always encouraged by that. So again, to all you many folks who are logged in, a pleasant good afternoon. On Facebook, YouTube, whatever medium you're logged in, and to say good afternoon to my dear friend Paula, wherever you are, Paula. I know, Paula, you're logged in. Good afternoon to you, Paula. And let's have another interesting conversation.
Yes, indeed. Brother Thomas, thank you very much, as I said, every time for making time, taking time of your Sunday afternoon. I know you could be doing something much more with your time, but you always take time off to come and help educate the listening public by and large. So thank you very much for that. And yes, Paula, Celestine, that is, wherever you are, good evening to you in a very, very special week. Folks, this evening, the topic for discussion this evening that our brother, Dr. Ralston Jeffrey, out of Antigua and Barbuda, will be, helping us go much deeper this afternoon is consent of the governed. why residency matters for voting in Dominica's general election. All right. So we're going to extrapolate, go be deeper in the voting aspect as it pertains to persons overseas, Dominicans overseas. Those of you who wants to exercise that franchise, we are reading of some recommendations from Brother Byron in that department. So we're going to, go a bit deeper as to what that entails, and in terms of the talk that has been around for some time, where your right is concerned as it pertains to voting, especially those of you who are non-resident in Dominica at this time. Brother Dr. Jeffrey will give us, in part that is as well, the Antigua's experience, what they did and continue to do in Antigua as it pertains to their diaspora, their persons living outside of Antigua and Barbuda, how they treat these persons in terms of their voting franchise, indeed. But that is the conversation we're going to have here this evening. So let me go, before I go to that live board, to say an hello to some of our fans that are there. Let me move across now to Dr. Jeffrey so that he can say his opening remarks right here. Brother Jeffrey, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Lieutenant.
We lost him, or something happened.
Yeah, the signal in Antigua and Barbuda is always, giving some issues. But I guess he will be back in just a bit. So whilst we are waiting for him here, let me just go to that live board and say hi and hello to some folks. Alvin, you yourself can pitch in on that live board as well. Mali Austri, you are there. Good evening to you. Owen Prosper, good evening. We also have Lucinda McDowell Dole, that is, good evening to you. Aura Burton, Anitha Adams Bernard, Eliza Louise Gomes, Dory Drago, Marlene Shillingford, Veronica Pascal, Marvella Defoe. Yes, Dorian Dorival, good evening to you and the family as well. We also have, is that Lini Andrew, you're watching as well. Ivinia Joseph, good evening. Stephanie John Baptist, you are there. Patricia Fontaine, you're also there. Carol Fontaine. Pat Corbett, you're also there. Ivo James and Alvin, can you just continue?
Yeah, I see my good friend Jeffrey Brisbane there. Jeffrey and I go way back, schoolmate together at the SMA. Jeffrey, good to see you, my brother. Peter Carbon. Peter Carbon is always tuning. I also see Angela Paul, always tuning as well, and Marilyn Challenger. So yes, Viva Mamo is watching. So a pretty large audience. Pat Corbett, Norma Ito, Valda Elwa. So we have quite a few folks tuning. I see Brother Ralston is back with us. Can you hear us, Brother Jeffrey?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Okay. Yeah, we got lost a while ago.
Okay, just before you continue, so can you just move that camera a little higher? Yeah, voila, right there. Okay, so you can continue on where you left off. Thanks.
Yeah, let me say good evening to you, Loftus, and to Alvin and your many viewers who are logged in, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram. Of course, I'm very happy to be with you. I feel honored to share with you in this afternoon's proceedings.
Yeah, Brother Thomas, I think we're having some serious technical issues.
Yeah, on his end. I think he's having a little problem, but don't you worry, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But Lofty, though, I think the topic we are discussing this afternoon is very important. You see, because let's try and connect the dots, as it were. The CCJ said that the central list, what constitute the heart of an election, the list of electors, that constitute the heart of an election. So, which means therefore that list must be uncorrupted, uncompromised. But for that list now to be uncorrupted, not compromised, it has to be drawn out properly. See what I'm saying? So for your name to get on the list, there's certain criteria that have to be met. You are 18 years of age, you are a citizen, you resides in the polling district, and all of that other stuff. We'll refer to it in more directly as the conversation continues. So clearly, residency is going to play a very important part of that. In other words, we have to be able to determine, first and foremost, that you are a resident of the district, a citizen of Dominica, before your name gets on it. So that list, the outcome of that list is going to be, as I said, not corrupted. Or we have a list that we can work with and say, well, these are the lists of names. So that discussion is going to be very interesting. And as we said, we would like to learn from our brother there in Antigua what obtains, because like I've said before, it's not a question of reinventing the wheel, but what best practices obtains elsewhere that we can use, given that we are now onto the road of reforming our electoral process.
Yes, indeed. Brother Jeffrey, once you're there and you're hearing me, you can give me that shout out, and we'll pull you back into the conversation. But yes, thank you, Alvin, for your opening thoughts here on the discussion that we're about to have here. But in particular, as I said before, we want to pay particular attention to Dominicans, that is, living outside there somewhere. That I can tell you based on the recommendations that came through from Brother Byron. That is a very contentious issue. Some persons are for certain things, some are against certain things. So we will have that discussion this evening. And as you said, Dr. Jeffrey is here. He will tell us what they did and continue to do in Antigua and Barbuda as it pertains to their citizens living outside of their space when it comes to general elections. And we can see what we can take from them in terms of advice, or even leave out in terms of we moving forward in Dominica. All right, Brother Dave Bertrand, you are there. Good evening to you. Also, Judith Cochran, you're also there. You joined in a while ago. John Francis, Ashby Scotland, Valda Ilwa, Norma Ito, Marilyn Challenger, Angela Paul, Maury Jules. Good evening to you. Okay, Dr. Jeffrey, you're back. If that happens again, we hope not. But I guess for the continuation of the conversation, you may just have to turn off your video, and the audio aspect will have to suffice, because I suspect you have an issue with bandwidth at this time. But let us try it again to see how that works out from there.
Yes, I was saying that I'm very happy to be with you as part of your electoral reforms, and trying to get people more aware as to their responsibilities in terms of the process of the elections. And I guess reforms are something which are talked about on a global basis, because it is the accuracy of your voting process which identifies your electoral system, whether it is corrupted or whether it is fair, free from fear, and indeed one which is credible. And so the whole question of residency becomes to the fore. In our situation, in terms of residency, in order for a person to be a registered voter or to apply to be a voter, they must be in the constituency for a minimum of 1 month. 1 month. Bear in mind that our elections are localized in the context that we have 16 constituencies on Antigua and one on Barbuda. So in effect, there's 17 constituencies in Antigua and Barbuda. And so in order for a person to be on the voters list, they've got to be resident in the constituency for at least 1 month. And bear in mind that that is very, very critical because we are having localized elections. In other words, we're having 17 elections. Even though it's a national elections, we're based on constituencies, as I said earlier, 16 on Antigua and 1 on Barbuda. So in effect, we are having 17 elections simultaneously or at the same time. So in order for a person to qualify or to be on the voters list, they've got to be resident within a particular constituency for at least 1 month. Then they would have to apply to the electoral office to be registered. And of course, there's certain things that you have to take, government ID. Now they're asking for birth certificate and things of this sort. And as I said last time I was on, that in 2024 next year, we will be having re-registration because our cars have a 10-year life cycle. So next to the retirees will go through that period again of having voter re-registration. And so by that time, we'll be able to have an updated list. In what is critical is that you want to ensure that your list is not corrupted, that it is clean, that it is credible. So at the end of the day, you can say that, in effect, our list was clean, purged, as the case may be. But initially, as I said, you have to be resident or residing in a particular constituency for a period of at least 1 month.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Jeffrey, for that opening in terms of that setting of the foundation, as it were. Let me ask you off the bat, sir, in terms of registration of electors, I understand the 1 month criteria for the residency that you spoke of. The registration aspect of it. Let's say, for example, someone turns 18 in Antigua and Barbuda and they want to be registered. Can they do that outside of Antigua and Barbuda?
That's a very good question. We have certain what do you call it, agencies or consulates in different parts of the world, United States, England, and so on. We do have consulates, and my understanding is that you can go to those embassies and you can apply for registration. You can apply. That is my understanding. That is subject to correction. Mm-hmm. But on the ground here in Antigua, on the ground, once you turn 18, you can apply to the Electoral Commission. We do have ongoing registration within the constituencies. That's the law. But because of logistical reasons and other asset or factors, most of the registration is done in a prescribed area or in a central area as against within the country themselves. We have fought against this. We have drawn this to the authorities, but they say, hey, sometimes budgetary constraints and these things sort of negate them not being able to have it within the constituency. And we can understand because you're renting different areas, for this exercise. You might not have person going every day, but if you have it in a centralized area at their office, which they have, with a process, operates, so we can, we can flex a little bit on that, although it's inconvenience for some persons. I think that as mature people, we have got to take the whole picture into consideration and so we'll find if this is the reasons, so let it be. But in short, my understanding is that we can apply to the different consulates for registration as the case may be, in those areas where we do have the consulates.
Okay, thank you very much, brother, for your response on that. Alvin, anything you want to add?
What I would like to ask Brother Jeffrey is that as it is right now, do their law have a specific definition of residency and registration? Because they're two different things. So
Okay.
does your law define residency? Is there a definition for that? And does it define registration?
Okay. Residency, you've got to be domiciled or residing in the particular locale. In other words, I live in Casada Gardens. If I apply to the registration officer to be registered, I must show proof that I would have been residing in the area for at least 1 month. That is a qualifying period. One month. Then once I meet that certification, then of course I will be able to go through the process in terms of my documentation, my IDs and so forth, and all of the things that they would need to have me registered within the particular constituency. That is how the system works.
So again, let me make sure I get you clear. You are saying in your law, residency is defined. It is spelled out in your legislation.
It is defined as being domiciled, living in a constituency for a period of 1 month.
Okay. So my follow-up to that is, if, as you said, you have you have embassies outside of Antigua that does registration. If an Antiguan wants to get his name on the electors list, although he may register through this consulate's office, he would not, in effect, complete that full registration and to have his name show up on the list unless he's domiciled in that polling station in Antigua for at least 1 month.
Absolutely, you're spot on. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Excellent. All right. Go ahead.
Because you remember, you are applying here now locally to the registration.
Wow, we lost him, Lofty. We lost him again, Lofty. So let's move on. Like you said, maybe he might have to put the video on and just do the audio. But I'm sure he's going to come back in. Very interesting conversation so far. So here's the deal, Lofty. In the as you rightly pointed out, in Sir Byron's draft report, if I may call it that, his report on the Registration of Electors Act and Registration of Electors Regulations 2023, on page, is there a number on that page, boy? I'm trying to see. Anyhow, but somewhere in the report, here's what he said in the report under the matter as it relates to residency of voters. The caption is residency of voters. And he says there, the current electoral system does not provide mechanism to verify the residency of voters. Full stop. Feedback from the commission is that the legislation does not include any definition of residency, and consequently, this impedes the authenticity and credibility of the current electoral system. So you see that word he used there? Authenticity and credibility. Now that credibility, as we said earlier on that I mentioned, goes to the list. So if you're not in a position to verify residency or to define what residency in, then it means that the credibility of the list that comes out to use for the purposes of voting, we have an issue. So that's where this thing is so important. Now, I know we are here speaking more directly to Dominicans living overseas, but I think this residency applies across the board because, for example, if I'm living in Goodwill, then that is where I would have to show that I'm living in goodwill, register in that polling station, be able to vote in goodwill, and not be able to move from goodwill and say, go vote in Mao, because I'm not living in Mao. I just thought I would make that point. What's your thought on that?
Yes, Alvin, you are spot on indeed in terms of your analysis so far, based on what you just read from what Sir Dennis Byron is recommending as a way forward. One of the things, Alvin, that we have to sort of differentiate there as we move along is that, and you rightly pointed out a while ago, the point of residency, what it means or what it should mean for us in Dominica. Dr. Jeffrey a while ago pointed out what it means for them in Antigua. And so the Dominican public, as we are going through that process to help clean up our mess, read that whole electoral process, we should be very clear in our mind as to what residency means in terms of a requirement for exercising that right, and also what it means to be registered. And you pointed it out a while ago, because one of the hot items that I know for sure that is already surfacing its head is a lot of persons overseas, Alvin, persons who are living outside of Dominica. There's this issue of they exercising their rights. And as we said on Civic Vibes a number of times already, and just to reiterate that point, we for sure really wouldn't want anyone to be disenfranchised of that right to vote. But having said that, these persons who choose to live outside there would have to understand that everything in this life operates via a law or some sort of regulation in order that things work properly. So it cannot be in that situation you want to have your cake, you want to bake your cake, and you want to still eat your cake. So what we are saying is that once you meet the whatever stipulated rule or regulation there is for you guys out there, that is fine. But we are hearing a sort of, clandestine, if I call it, subtle talk now, especially by Roosevelt Skerrit, about trying his very best to protect that vote by all means necessary for persons who choose to live outside of Dominica and who may not necessarily be qualified to be on that electors list, which you said is like, it is a very sanctimonious thing. So getting on that list, it is very critical that persons meet the requirements and that they follow the rules, they follow the regulations thereof. Because the move that we are seeing sort of, moving or going around now, it is not good.
Right.
Where Alvin, just to wind up, Roosevelt Skerrit is injecting his own opinion in the matter now and is trying to put one against the other. That is what I'm seeing. When he's talking about, oh, you send your barrels back home, you send your monies back home, you send your deals back home, and they or some persons want to cut you off from exercising the right. We are not saying that. But what we are saying is that the rules must be followed.
No, I agree with you entirely, Lofty. And that is why I'm so happy that we have the person of Brother Jeffrey here with us, because, again, I will repeat that. We are part of a much larger grouping. We are a member of the OECS, and we're also a member of CARICOM, and we're also a member of the Commonwealth of Nations family. And clearly, what the Prime Minister Skerrit is trying to impose here, in my mind, and I stand corrected if that's not the case, but clearly I don't think that obtains elsewhere. I intend to do some further research and look at some of the other legislations in the region, namely St. Kitts, maybe St. Vincent, Antigua, Grenada, Jamaica, even Trinidad. And that's why I'm saying, I keep making that point, that it's not, to use the term, it's not rocket science. In other words, we should not try to reinvent the wheel, because by and large, the constitutions of the other countries in the region are similar, or constitutions are similar. We all had it handed down to us from Britain. The only difference you might have is in terms of what type of I wouldn't say democracy, but what type of system government we have. Dominica, it's a republic, whereby we have a president. Whereas St. Lucia, they still recognize the monarchy and have a governor general. That's the only difference by and large. But in terms of the constitution itself and how we should govern ourselves as a nation is by and large the same. So similarly, it would seem to me that we can, if one might say, borrow and look at what the other electoral laws are like in the region. And that's why I asked the brother the question, whether in fact is the Elections Act or the regulations define clearly what the term residency should be and what registration are, because they're two different things. And I agree with you entirely. And therein now lies the question where all of us who sees the importance of this matter of electoral reform need to make our voices heard and say, well, hey, you can't have that provision in the act or in the law, which seems to further undermine the process. Unlike you, and as Civic Vibes have said repeatedly through this forum, we're not in any way want to disenfranchise anyone. That's certainly not the intention, to disenfranchise anyone. But as you said, if Joe Blow is living in New York for the last 10, 15 years, while it's true he may send a barrel or two or whatever to his folks in Dominica, that in itself shouldn't be a criteria to say that Joe Blow now jump on a plane, especially where he's given a free pass, a free ticket by the Skerrit administration, and come down and vote government on the people. I don't think that is right. That cannot be right. And therefore, we need to clearly determine what residency, what that definition of residency should be. And this is what we should push for.
Yeah, true. So just before we try to get back Brother Jeffrey in the loop, let me just say, Alvin, what I think we as Dominicans need to be very, very clear on in moving forward, and that is where the education now, or the re-education as it were, comes in, is that when we look at the recommendations from Byron, there should be a demarcation line, straight up, as to what we in Dominica should allow and what we in Dominica should not allow. For example, we hear about the cards, the type of card for voting. And I am saying, and that is Loftus Jr. speaking now from a personal standpoint, I am saying, whatever card these people choose to come up with, or we choose to come up with in Dominica, there are supposed to be some basic information in terms of a standard card for voting in Dominica. And there are certain situations that, for example, even the card itself, that I believe, in terms of the calling of the name of the card or whatever it is, then there can be a little compromise on that aspect. And I am saying that. Compare and contrast to what Byron is recommending to us in Dominica, that his recommendation is that the commission, the electoral commission, gets the power through that bill, through that law, to send or to go overseas to register or to confirm or to reconfirm persons in Dominica so that they can be bona fide on that list. And we are saying that should be a non-starter. Elections are held in Dominica, people. The Electoral Commission should supervise the registration, the re-registration, the whatever it is for persons living, persons who are going through the grinds, as it were. And so the notion of getting that mandate to send agents outside there, that is what exactly we are trying to get ourselves out of, the mess, the political mess, as it were. And so if we decide to close our eyes or go to sleep and put ourselves back in that mess via legislation now, then it may just spell more doom and gloom for us in terms of proper governance in Dominica. So what I want to say, there's supposed to be clear demarcation lines, what we can allow and what we should not allow in moving forward. Okay, Dr. Jeffrey, you're back. Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, okay. I guess I missed a good portion of what I've obtained before. But I believe from a personal level that elections are the people's business. That's the first thing I want to posit. Elections are the people's business. It is by that process that we send people to our legislature. And that's why it's called Representation of the People Act. Because we are electing persons to represent us in the parliament or in the legislature. And as you know, election sequences. So I posit that it's the very serious business, and whatever legislation is taking place ought to be determined by civil society. In other words, the church, the Chamber of Commerce, the Employees Federation, and all of these different bodies ought to be involved in terms of the legislation, how it is drafted, how it is presented, because at the end of the day, remember that elections do have consequences, and the laws that are passed are critical to how we live. So the populace, the general populace, must have a say, should have a say in terms of how those legislations are being drafted. So there has to be a meeting of the minds. Whether it is done through cottage meetings, through town hall meetings, all of these things are critical to solicit the views of every person. Because at the end of the day, you want to ensure that your elections reflect the will of the people. And that is how our democracies are based. Remember, we have first past the post. And therefore, every person ought to have a say, should have a say in terms of how those laws are drafted. And from a personal perspective, I don't believe that people who are not residing in the country, I'm speaking for me now, I don't believe that people that reside in the country should be able to determine the outcome of the elections. Because at the end of the day, they can go back to where they are living, and you have got to live with what would have taken place at that elections. But again, that is something that is up for debate.
And Dr. Jeffrey, you're making so much of a valid point there, in that I am putting it to you now, Dr. Jeffrey. And I guess Alvin can concur, some of the viewers can concur as well, that the point that you just touched on, that is exactly the way that the Dominica Labour Party in government in Dominica have been able to come back and retain the seat of power, in that they go outside of Dominica and basically do whatever tampering, manipulation there is to get the necessary count in terms of voters, and basically tip the election in their favor. And we are saying, that is why I said before, based on the recommendation of Byron and moving forward, then anything and everything to do with general elections in Dominica should be done in Dominica. That is the mantra. That is the song. That is the psalm that should be on everybody's lip at this time in moving forward.
Well, I think
Dr. Jeffrey, you can turn off your audio, your video, sorry, and we can just finish the conversation on audio alone. All right. So if you're hearing me, then we can do that.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, again, Dr. Jeffrey is just echoing what you may have heard me said many times on this platform, is that election has consequences. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I mean, election does have consequences, and those consequences can be either good or bad. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't just begin and end with going into the polling station and putting an X. It goes far beyond that. So he is right. The purpose of an election in a democracy is to elect persons to represent the citizens. So if I'm living all the way in Atlanta, I mean, I may visit my country occasionally, but to what extent and what impact would it have? Let's say I'm from Mau and I vote the representative in Mau, that whatever he does or does not do have an impact on me. I'm in Atlanta, my family is in Atlanta, my wife is in Atlanta, my children is in Atlanta, my grandchildren is going to school there. I'm working in Atlanta, my wife is working in Atlanta. So it doesn't make too difference to me whether a tax is increased or not increased. My business is in Atlanta, where I want to make sure that the mayor or the governor doesn't impose tax on me and I can go to a town hall and raise hells or write a letter to the governor or whoever. I mean, that's what it is. So if you're not in Dominica, and then now you come in Dominica and impose that, and this PAL rep gets into office, which should not have in the first place through bogus means, then I mean, how can that be right? That can't be right.
Yeah. Yes, Alvin. Dr. Jeffrey, can you hear us?
His audio is connecting now.
Yeah.
So that can't be right, Lofty. I mean, any normal, reasonable, rational thinking person should come to the conclusion that doesn't make sense. I mean, there are exceptions in terms of persons who may be employed in what you call it, overseas offices, ambassadors, persons who are out there working on behalf of the government who is not physical in Dominica. That I can understand. But outside of that, if you chose to just go to New York and reside in New York, and then now the government sends you a ticket to come and vote to them, surely that undermines our democracy.
Yeah. Dr. Jeffrey, in moving forward, can you now just turn off your video so we can just hear your audio instead?
Turn off my video?
Yeah, just turn off your camera. Right. Okay. All right, good. So we can continue in that fashion.
Can you hear us? Ask him. Yeah. Can you hear us now? Okay, good.
Right. So you can continue on the point, but just before, let me just give the telephone numbers. Yes, we have telephone numbers that you can chime in. We'll be getting to the live conversations in a while on Facebook. But the numbers to call into the program, just in case you want to be part and parcel of the program, they are 245-2396. Again, 245-2396. These numbers are in chat already. And also 615-9470. Okay. We are live on Facebook and also live on YouTube as well. And please share the live as we are moving on. It's 1:45. At 7 o'clock, the top of the hour, we take a much needed break. Dr. Jeffrey, yes, continue on, sir.
Yeah, I'm saying that there are those who think that once you are an Antiguan, it gives you an inalienable right to vote or to register. All right. Whether you're living in North America or UK or wherever, that is one school of thought that once you are an Antiguan, a born Antiguan, you should be able to exercise your franchise wherever you're domiciled. Now, I have a different thought on that, because I believe that a person who comes into the country and they take part in the electoral process, when that is finished, they go back to wherever they are domiciled wherever they're living and they live their lives. We who remain on island have got to live with what we get from those consequences. So whilst I don't have a problem with people being registered, because once you meet the residency requirement, fine. But in terms of voting, that is a different perspective. So maybe we've got to rethink our electoral process and our processes in order to arrive at the final product. We're not in the business of wanting to disenfranchise people or persons, but at the end of the day, you can't eat your cake and have it, period. Those who are domiciled in a country, in other words, in Dominica, it is those Dominicans who reside in Dominica should be able to determine the outcome of the electoral process. Consequently, in Antigua, it is those of us who live here should be able to determine our electoral outcome. So these are issues that you have to have a conversation going forward to get the ideas, as we say, all ideas contend.
Yes, indeed. And Alvin, just to piggyback on the point that you made earlier, in that I understood what you said clearly well, Alvin, but you know, there are persons, we always have the exception in certain situations. And there are persons, and that is why the law is there. That is why these regulations are made. There may be persons, for example, Alvin, who may be living outside of Dominica and who may really be interested in coming back to Dominica to vote, you know, consciously that is. The law, the regulations, the electoral regulations give them that privilege as well. And so once they follow the law as prescribed, then we should not have a problem with these people. But this sort of, you know, going around the Caribbean or the world and skirting around for persons, paying persons, bribing persons to come back and participate in an election that makes the outcome, you know, not what the will of the people was in the first place, then that is where we have a serious issue. And that is why I'm saying a serious hard line needs to be drawn when it comes to persons living outside of Dominica and persons living within the quote unquote four walls of the country.
You're absolutely right, Lofty. You're absolutely correct. And I think one of the points that needs to be made as well is that I don't have the exact figures, but it is estimated that well over 70,000 persons, Dominicans, as of 2020 are living outside of Dominica. When you take into account folks who, you know, the migration is really high in Dominica, living out in the Caribbean, the UK, the North America. I mean, it's a staggering number. And I mean, if we were to venture in that direction, then clearly, again, we wouldn't have what is considered a true democracy. You would have persons outside of Dominica pretty much dictating and calling the shots. But let me just, for purposes of our discussion as well, let me just reference our constitution, which, as I said earlier, is pretty much similar throughout the region. And section 33 of our constitution, 33, 2A in particular of our constitution, 33, section 33, subsection 2A, it says, every Commonwealth citizen of the age of 18 years or upward who possesses such qualification, you hear the word? Who possesses such qualification relating to residence or domicile in Dominica as Parliament may prescribe, shall, unless he is disqualified by Parliament from registration as a voter for the purpose of electing a representative, be entitled to be registered as such a voter in accordance with the provision of any law in that behalf, and no other persons may be so registered. So clearly it recognizes that although that privilege or that right is there to be registered as a voter, it clearly says there that who possesses such qualification relating to residence or domicile. So therein implies that there has to be some minimum qualification for that residency. And then we move to the next stage, the registration of it. Like our brother there described.
Yeah.
The contentious, therefore, is whether we're just going to open that floodgate and say, well, as long as you're out there, you're Dominican out there in the US or wherever, you can be part of that. I'm saying no. There should be what, in our view, a qualifying or qualification that determines residency for that purpose. And it should not be a situation where anyone out there in the diaspora who just feels, well, oh, I'm a Dominican, then I'm entitled to vote, not meeting what that requirement is, what that minimum or stipulated requirement ought to be in terms of residency. And it is interesting to note also in the current Registration of Electors Act that we have, Chapter 203 of the Revised Laws of Dominica, where it talks about qualification for registration. It says there, not as we said, because we don't have, as we speak now, a definition or anything as it relates to residency, but it says there what allows a person to stay on the register. And one such thing is that you have to be a Commonwealth citizen who, a citizen of Dominica, one, or a Commonwealth citizen who have a period of 12 months immediately before and qualifying date of the election. And then, of course, where we have the situation, which we have not been really doing, where your name can be removed from the list if you've been out from the country for a certain period of time. So it is something we have to guard very, 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 very closely. And like you say, Lofty, it's a situation where we should not allow folks to just walk in and take back for democracy. I think Brother Jeffrey is back with us.
It is certainly not a wash your foot thing and come as it pertains to voting in Dominica. Brother Jeffrey will be taking a break at 7 o'clock. It is 4 minutes to the hour of 7 o'clock. But let me ask you, sir, before we take that break. Brother Sir Dennis Byron, the one who is making the one who is charged to come up with recommendations for us as to how we move forward. He, in his reporting back to us in Dominica, when he looked at the laws and the regulations that we used to, or not we used to, we are still operating under because nothing new has taken effect as yet. He is recommending that we scrap what we are operating on presently, and he's recommending fresh laws, fresh regulations. What do you interpret by he saying or he suggesting that we should scrap what we have and move to something fresher or newer?
Well, I don't know what you have. Obviously, the good gentleman would be privy to what you have on your laws as it relates to the electoral process. And I would suggest that it would be important for you to look at the modern legislations, let's say in Antigua. We're pretty new in terms that our act was reformed in 2004, 2011, 2001. And when we set up our electoral commission, we had the assistance of the Jamaica Electoral Office. They were very instrumental in assisting us in that respect. So I would suggest that you could get the Jamaica Electoral Office to assist you in terms of the electoral process going forward. They're pretty much up to date. Now, the whole question of the residency period is very, very important. As I said earlier, you don't want people to come in, vote in the elections, and then they leave next day and go about their business. So in terms of the residency period, in Antigua, we have what you call claims and objections, period. So even though a person would have applied for or would apply to be registered, it is not automatic that they become registered, because there has to be that claims and objections period, and then out of that procedure will determine as to whether or not the person is eligible to be registered and to be taking part in electoral process. So that is something that you might want to look at, a claims and objections period, so that people will be able to say, okay, fine, I know Loftus Durand, he does not live in this area, he says he lives here, but I've never seen him. I'm living here for a year, and I've never seen him. And I might not be the only person saying this. So you need to have those checks and balances going forward to ensure that if John Doe says he resides in an area, that is what it is, and so be it.
Let me ask Dr. Jeffrey a question based on what he just said, and just trying again to go back to the question of residency. If I'm a Dominican who migrates to Antigua and I'm working in Antigua, based on the laws that you just described, I can, as a Dominican living in Antigua, working and living in Antigua, I can apply, the residency would apply to me, and I can register and vote in the elections.
Well, you'd have to be domiciled in the constituency for at least a month.
Okay.
That's the procedure.
So if I'm a Dominican, I move to Antigua, I'm living in St. John's for a month, 2-3 months, then that qualifies me for residency.
Not if you live here for a month. You've got to be living here for at least 4 years.
Or 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So so the law stipulates that as well, that I need to be living in the country for 4 years.
Yes.
So
continuously.
Continuously for 4 years. That's in the law.
Yeah.
So I'd have to be living continuously in Antigua for 4 years, and
Absolutely.
then in the polling district for at least a month.
Yes.
And then I can register to vote.
You can apply. You can apply.
Uh-huh.
You can make the application to be registered as a voter within the constituency that you've been living for that month in the 4-year period. However, there's a period called claims and objections, whereby it's like a check and balance situation that you must be able to prove, and those who are living in the constituency must be able to prove, yes, I know this man, he's been living here for a month. Where does he sleep? Where does his mail go? I mean, is his garbage collected on a regular basis, or he's just scamming, as the case may be? So that claims and objection period is very, very critical to the final outcome as to whether or not you get your name on the list.
So I have to go through all of these, and then my name may be on that list in order to vote.
Absolutely.
Okay. We are on the hour.
Yes, we are on the hour, folks. Thank you very much. We are having a very interesting conversation here. When we come back after the break, we'll go to the live feed to read some of your comments here, so that your suggestions can be taken on board in the conversation as we're moving forward. Remember, folks, the numbers that you can call into the program, they are 245-2396 and 615-9470. Let's take that all-important break. At this time, we go into St. Lucia. There's a brother called Morgi in St. Lucia singing a song entitled Mwe Pe, meaning I am afraid in English. Let's take this one. We'll be back in just a bit.
St. Lucia! Somebody make some noise! Hey! I wasn't going to say nothing, but everywhere I pass in, you should hear what some people that say. They say all the years you singing, politicians you lambasting. Now in the tent, your voice went silent. From the time man came in power, everything on hot in St. Lucia. But it was skinny, you You roll your mouth already. Boy, the people mad. Some of them sad. They in pain. That's why I can't stay quiet again. When I hear $2.6 billion, I hear China will take over. The guy in charge of all the money that we're getting from foreign countries. To be a citizen of St. Lucia, the passport come cheap like toilet paper. I was afraid of the dark, so you bring the flag over. When still pass, I don't really swear. Hey!
Brother Morgie from St. Lucia singing a song entitled Moins Père, meaning I am afraid in English.
Why the deal was sent so quickly, right after the election victory? Did you have to pay back campaign money? Questions the people asking, who the hell is benefiting when you give all the land to all them small like Chinaman? Will the buyback cost bring us home? Will the buyback cost bring us home? We all agree we need investment in the country. Boy, the people cry, no one heard their cries. Some of them scream like Jesus, he must fulfill his father's dream. Now I hear Bradley Phillips cannot remember what he signed on the piece of paper. The price of property won't rise. I hear Chasney will capitalize. Again. Now I heard the Prime Minister on the common vacation in St. Lucia. That just give me nightmare. Thank you.
All right, Brother Morgie, thank you very much indeed, folks. Let's go back to our live panel here as we continue on that all-important discussion we are having here. Judith Cochran, good evening to you. Judith said I'm going deep tonight in terms of that track that just played. We have some suggestions. We also have some scenarios and some questions as well on the board. Let's take some of them here as we are moving on. Omar Mornell writes, I also think CARICOM citizens should not have open voter access in our elections. Folks, Alvin, Brother Jeffrey, just take note of these comments so that we can respond to some of these comments here. Omar Mornell again writes, I also think CARICOM citizens should not have open voter access in our elections. That is the point that Omar Mornell is saying. Althea Rennie writes, there are some Dominicans who live outside Dominica who play a more instrumental and integral role in the well-being of Dominicans. Therefore, it is my opinion that, that being able to reside outside of Dominica and vote should be allowed without bribes or gifts from any political party, because this is when that right becomes unfair. Okay, that is Miss Rennie writing there. Adelaide Paul writes, here's the thing. These guys think that they will be in power forever. They better be careful because things change. And the laws they pass today will one day become the whips on their backs tomorrow. Okay, that is Adelaide Paul comment here. Dave Bertrand writes, has Byron recommended to his cousin in St. Kitts and Nevis such changes to the constitution there? That is that all important question. And Alvin, please take note, Dr. Jeffrey, please take note of that question as well from Island Boy George, that person calls themselves. Island Boy George writes, doesn't the fact that you own property on the island qualify you to be a registered voter, even if you reside outside of the island? Folks, I think we have enough on our plate so that we can kind of digest on these scenarios and questions. Yes.
Yeah, well, let me, if I may take the first one from Omar. It's not a carte blanche. As I referred earlier again to our current registration of electors, chapter 2, let me get it right there so I can. Chapter 203 of Act 13 of 1974, that's the Parent Act with several amendments. Section 5, which speaks to the question of qualification for registration. It says that subject to this act and any written law imposing any disqualification for registration as an elector, a person is qualified to be registered as an elector for a polling district if he, A, is a citizen of the Commonwealth of Dominica, or B, is a Commonwealth citizen who has resided in Dominica for a period of 12 months immediately before the qualifying date and is 18 years of age. And it goes on to say, in D, has resided in that polling district for a continuous period of at least 3 months immediately preceding the date of registration. But in the case of a person who has attained the age of 18 years, within the period of 3 months immediately preceding the date of his registration, no such residence qualification shall be required. And that is a little vexatious. So it recognizes that you have to be there for at least 12 months and 3 months within the polling district. We just heard from Brother Jeffrey where he says that in Antigua, you have to be living in the country for at least 4 years. 4 years. So it is not, I would say, a carte blanche. And bear in mind, as I said earlier, that we are part of this larger grouping. We're part of OECS, we're part of CARICOM, we're part of the Commonwealth, and the intention there, freedom of movement of people, freedom of movement of goods, having common currency, as in the case of the OECS, having those things. So it is not far-fetched that you would have someone from St. Lucia who may be living in Dominica for the last 2 years, 3 years, 12 years. The question remains whether we want to move that 12 months to maybe like 4 years as the case of Antigua. And it's the same thing. If you look at the United States as it is, for example, I may be currently residing in Atlanta, and the state is made up of several states. They all govern, have their own laws and rules. And I moved to Florida. I should be able to meet whatever the requirement is in Florida and be able to vote. So I think the million-dollar question is being able to have that, whatever that qualifying period is.
Yes.
That's my take on it.
That's
really.
your take on it, yeah.
The others, I will make a comment once Dr. Jeffrey comes in.
Yes, Dr. Jeffrey, I would really want you to respond to the question of Brother George on the live feed, who basically in a nutshell is saying once someone owns property in Antigua, in Dominica, St. Lucia, wherever it is, though they may be living outside of the jurisdiction, they should be able to be registered and then cast a ballot. Your take?
Look, that is one of the things that some people prefer over in Antigua. There are those of our brothers and sisters who live in the diaspora, and they think that because they would have owned a property on Antigua, or because they send remittances from time to time to their loved ones on Antigua, that gives them an automatic qualifying concept of being able to register to vote. Like I said, I understand the situation, and I'm sympathetic to what they're saying. However, bear in mind that you can't eat your cake and have it, okay? When a person who is not domiciled in Antigua comes into Antigua, conveniently at election time, he goes into constituency because he's registered and he votes. That vote has some kind of consequence. That person then leaves Antigua the next day and goes back to where they're domiciled, whether in diaspora or otherwise. Then I've got to live with what they did. And that is not necessarily fair to those of us who would reside throughout Antigua or Dominica, as the case may be. We've got to live with the decisions that those people would have made. Now, those decisions might be to my detriment or to your detriment, but I've got to live with that. Is that fair? Is that moral? Is it legal? That is something that we've got to distinguish, as we said, because elections have consequences. So we've got to look at the best practice. What is the best practice? What is it that the majority of the people would want in Dominica or in Antigua? What is the end product that we're looking for? Is it that we want to encompass all and sundry in a process, and then not all of us would have to live with that, but a portion. I think that is something that needs a discussion, that needs an engagement. So for us to come, we're not going to get it right, but at least we can get it to what we really want. If that's what the general people want, so be it. If that is what it is, if you follow what I'm saying, there are consequences attached to all of this. And because I might have a property and send remittances, does that automatically give me the right to choose the government of the day? Or let me say, okay, let those who are domiciled in Antigua or Dominica, let those who reside there full-time, let them decide their own destiny in terms of choosing the government.
Yep. Yeah, as you said, that conversation must continue here.
Yeah.
Let us just take some more
comments. No, let me make a point there, Lofty. I want to make a point, very, very significant, because that question the person raised about, the caller raised about property is very, very important. Let us understand, Lofty, when we got adult suffrage many, many years ago, we got it on the premise that every man should be entitled one vote, one man. Because what obtained before was the fact that the aristocracy and those who had money could vote. That's how it was. The big man who had the estates and the pounds and the shillings, they were the one that could vote. And we, the little man, had no say to vote. To be able to vote, you had to have land. You had to have property. You had to have money. And it was the same thing too in the US until we fought for our right to vote. So that is, listen, these people died and lost their lives. Blood was shed for that. So let me say to this person on the call that, number one, this is not in the law. So you don't have to have property to vote. Whether you have, the only disqualifier is if you are a felon, or you are an inmate in the incarcerated, or something to that effect, or you are mentally, this. But in terms of property, that's a no, 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 no. This must be eliminated. We cannot go back to the 1910s and the 1930s and the 1920s, where in order to vote, you had to own property. Let me also
I guess, Alvin, just to help strengthen that person's point, although we are moving away from it, but I would want to think they're echoing the point that they may have properties and they're paying taxes. So they are part and parcel.
No.
Of the tax-paying public and should be able to exercise that franchise.
Absolutely no. Absolutely no. Let's understand what that right to vote is. See that sacred thing you call that vote? It should be in never way connected or construed with whether you're wealthy, whether you have property, whether you do not have property. Never. In the United States of America, a green card holder who is not a citizen can own property, but he can't vote. You could be in the US for 20 years and you're a green card holder, you're not a US citizen, and you can own property. You could even have business, paying taxes to the IRS, to the federal government, employing people. You have several houses in New York City or wherever. You're a green card holder. You're not a citizen. You cannot vote. So let's understand this vote quite clearly. And this question of property should be a no-no. I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. All right, let's get back to the live feed here. Joan Bernard James is right in there. And that is the point we are discussing. Where's that point? Where's this point? Yes. Joan Bernard James writes, in a democracy, the phrase, open quote, consent of the governed, close quote, means that the people who are going to live under a government should be the ones to choose it, or else it is not a democracy. Your thoughts, Dr. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. This is what I've been saying all along, that it is the governed, and the governed here meaning those who have got to live under the particular result of an electoral period. In other words, and I go back to what I said earlier, a person who comes into Antigua or Dominica primarily at election time only to vote, to choose a government, then once that exercise is finished, that person leaves and go back to where they domiciled. But those of us who are domiciled, whether it's in Dominica or Antigua, we've got to live with the consequences of the total exercise, meaning that all those votes that would have been cast at election time, those votes have some consequence. And so those who are domiciled in the particular domain, i.e. Dominica or Antigua, would have to live with those consequences and or choices. Whereas those who come in for the exercise, they go back to where they are, they don't have to live with it. So it's a disadvantage somewhere. But as I said, the dialogue has to continue, and it is by engaging the general public, through that process that we try to get at the final picture as to what we want.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, brother, for your response. Read that comment in the chat. Antoine George, brother Thomas, is making a very important point here. We haven't touched on that aspect of things as yet, but he's reminding us there in a message that says the sale of our passports must be considered. We don't know who going to come and vote in our country.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely a very valid observation. And that is why it is so important that we establish and define clearly the question of residency and all of that, because as you know, Lofty, there are folks who currently have a passport and may have never set foot in Dominica. They are presumably citizens of Dominica because they carry a Dominican passport, but they may have never set foot in Dominica.
So in terms of the demarcation line, Alvin, should that be a demarcation line?
Of course, by all means.
CBI passport holders.
Certainly. I mean, the whole passport arrangement in itself is a huge problem. The way in which folks are able to get a citizenship passport, a passport of Dominica, rather, not citizenship, it's a passport. Once you get it, it's a passport. It's no different to yours that you have. We know what the requirements are in Malta and other jurisdiction that runs similar program. It's not easy to get a passport like that. You have to meet certain requirements before you get hold of a Malta passport. But in our case, it's different. And therefore, it shouldn't be a situation simply because you own a passport that entitles you to be able to vote. And you're right, there need to be demarcation on that. It's back to the section in the Constitution 33 that I referenced earlier. So certainly, I agree. And the other point that you raised earlier, which Brother Jeffrey responded to, is quite true. In a democracy, is representative of the people. That's what it is. It's the people. And therefore, the people that vote in should be the people, as I said, within that particular jurisdiction, and not a question where someone just come, vote, pack their bags, leave next day, and leave the people to their own business. So yeah, I agree entirely.
All right. Yes, we have a very interesting comment here, coming from a very interesting brother, indeed, Clarence Christian. Let's see if we can dissect that point that he's making there, Alvin. Clarence Christian writes here. Let me just open up his message here. The Canadian Supreme Court, and that is a case he normally like to pounce on. The Canadian Supreme Court, he writes, has ruled that voting is a fundamental political right. One's voting right cannot be decided by where one resides, no matter how long, but by the citizenship of the individual, once duly registered to vote. Dr. Jeffrey, your comments, please.
Look, Canada is, it's a huge country, as you know, and so to look at the case study to suit our thing, it's a big difference, And I think I have a little bit of idea about Canada, but I won't really get good into that, But the point is that we're small countries, all right, and one vote can determine the outcome of a government. One, in Antigua, in our last elections, as you know, we have a 17-member House, and we have 8 members on the opposition benches and 9 in the government. In one particular constituency, the one person lost by six votes. Six votes. So you can understand how close the elections were. When you take that into consideration, remember that we're looking at a government, a structure, as to how we send men and women into our House of Representatives. We send them there to look at our best interest. That is primary. We vote for representatives. We don't vote for cabinet ministers. It is from those people that we send to the parliament that the cabinet is chosen. And the cabinet has to be accountable to the parliament. Understand that? The cabinet ought to be accountable to the parliament. And therefore, what you want to ensure is that those persons that we send to our parliament have the blessings of the electorate. And we can say that we voted for the government that we wanted. That is the end result of what we want. You spoke earlier of the whole question of citizenship by investment. We have a similar structure here in Antigua. Can we prevent those citizens who would have had a passport, investment passport, can we prevent them from voting? Certainly not. Once they would have met the residency requirements, then they'll be able to have the same privileges, just like I would have, or those other Antiguans, in the same exercise and experience. But in terms of comparing laws, what is a Canadian law, as Alvin just mentioned a while ago. I mean, United States, if you don't have citizenship, you can't vote. But in Antigua, in Dominica, you come for a period and you are able to vote. Does that sum up the result of what we want in terms of electoral process? Do we want to ensure that at the end of the day, that the election process was free and fair, and free from fear, and that the people got the government that they would have deserved? These are factors that we have to take on board in the equation.
Let me just make a comment, Lofty, if you don't mind, as it relates to my good friend, Clarence Christian. I'm happy that he could reference the Canadian Supreme Court ruling, but it must be read within context, okay? It is not just a question of referencing a ruling. It must be read within context. And I would suggest he goes back and read that actual ruling, Canada, in terms of how and what led to that ruling. But let me just bring his mind back to our jurisdiction.
That is where I know
our
you're
jurisdiction.
Going. That's where I know you're going.
You know me well, Lofty. In our jurisdiction, not even a year ago, July of this year will give 1 year since the CCJ ruling, 5th July 1922. On page section 108 of the CCJ, there were 5 justices, of which we are a part 2. That's our court, that's our Supreme Court. The CCJ is our Supreme Court, okay? From the local court, the OIS Court of Appeal, then to the CCJ. The CCJ says at 108, however, comma, there remains area of grave concern about how the process of these elections were conducted. And they're referring to the 2019 elections. Future elections in Dominica ought not to proceed with these or similar things, full stop, unquote. That were the words of our justices of the CCJ, telling us exactly what we should do as it relates to all of what we are discussing here this evening. Residency, the electors list, the registry of electors, the whole 9 yards. We've dealt with that report extensively on this program. So I would suggest to my friend here that we should first put our house in order based on the recommendations made by the CCJ, because there are several more recommendations in that document that we've referenced before we begin to look at what the Canadian Supreme Court may have ruled as it relates to that matter. Charity begins at home. Let's start at home and get our house in order before we can begin to look at what Canadian Supreme Court ruling may have handed down as it relates to Canadians.
True. Thank you very much, Alvin. Viva Mamo is writing here. Lofty Durant, can we legally say CBI citizens cannot vote if they meet the registration and voting requirement? That is an all-important question that person is asking there. Continues here with the comment, I doubt we can make a demarcation on that basis only. There are citizens endowed with the same constitutional rights. However, we can attack it from the residency status. For example, one has to reside in the country for a number of years. One needs to reside in the constituency for a number of months, etc. Therefore, even if one holds a CBI passport and the individual has never been to Dominica or lived in Dominica, he or she cannot, and that cannot is in caps, to reemphasize that point, cannot register to vote in Dominica. That's the point Viva Mamo made a while ago. Read the situation we were talking about, trying to set or put a demarcation line as to persons out there holding our passports in their hands.
we can get Dr. Jeffries to respond if in his case, because I know in Antigua they do have a citizen by investment program as well, if I'm not mistaken. So are those persons, how do they fit in the scheme of things as it relates to being able to vote, those CBI citizens? Are you able to speak to that, Dr. Jeffrey?
Well, I can speak, and I would want to say that I think I mentioned earlier that we cannot discriminate against your citizens, whether it is by CBI or whatever process. A citizen is a citizen is a citizen. And if a CBI citizen shows up to be registered, if they are able to meet the residency requirements of the 1 month in a constituency, there's nothing to prevent that person from being registered. The question is, these are called economic citizens, and do they have the time to come to Antigua and stay in a constituency for a month or 6 weeks or whatever, or they're too busy doing other things? So, but the question is either to show up. There's nothing to suggest that you will just automatically turn them down.
Yeah.
I don't think it works like that. A citizen is a citizen is a citizen. What we have to do is to ensure that we put the necessary legal framework in place, so it makes it hard for them to even think of wanting to be involved in the electoral process.
From out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Point taken. Thank you very much, Dr. Jeffrey, for your comment in that department, because most we know we don't want to play naive here. Most of the CBI passport holders in Dominica, and I can extend that to some of the folks in the region as well. Most of these people, they haven't, as Alvin said, even set foot in the country that basically sold them these passports. So voting itself may not necessarily be first and foremost or front and center on their mind. What is on their mind is that they want that document to move about, to do whatever they have to do with it. But now that is where Dr. Jeffrey said the legal framework must be there. The mechanism must be in place, so that just in case the political directorate now want to use these people to manipulate the outcome of the election, then we can stop them in a track right there. But as we said, I agree 100%. A citizen is a citizen, and once they meet that requirement, especially where residency is concerned, then, you know, we don't have an issue there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier in the program, that we have this claims and objections period. And I think that, you know, this, what we call them scrutineers, those who are there, because remember, the political parties in Parliament have scrutineers manning the manning the registration process on a daily basis. They're paid by the Treasury of Antigua Barbuda. So example, we have two mainline political parties in the Parliament, the ABLP and the UPP. So at the registration booth, you would have a scrutineer from the ABLP and one from the UPP. I don't think that all people will be so naive to the whole question of not observing a certain type of a person and or persons who would come in and wanting to be registered. In other words, if I see, let's say, a person, let's say from Dubai or from one of these, you know, Middle Eastern countries, and their culture, everything is different, automatically that should send a red flag to those who manage that process. So I think that, you know, that once you have the qualified people in place and who have got the whole concept of being smart, you know, they should be able to detect some of these issues.
Yeah, indeed. Another comment here. This one from Clarence Christian again. He writes, Viva Mamo, you are correct. These guys are not reading from the laws. CBI citizens must meet the residency requirement to register to vote. Alvin, let me ask you a question. Were you not reading from the laws tonight?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's where I've been reading from and quoting directly from our laws of Dominica.
Right. Okay, well. Thank you. Sure. Thank you for setting the record straight. So it's on that point I really want to push back on Brother Clarence Christian, because this brother always like to come and push his nose sometime in conversations, and I am saying now normally like to come with his political poisonous statements and say what is not happening. Alvin read from the documents tonight, the laws. Alvin quoted the laws. So for you coming there, Clarence Christian, and saying we are not reading the laws, you are basically telling an untruth. And we need you to stop spreading this kind of outright lies to poison some of the minds of the persons who are listening and reading your comments. All right, brother. So you need to just stop it. There is not the other type of programs that you guys can just come and just, let go your poisonous stuff and run off. No, we'll not have none of it here. If you are making a point that it is factual in nature, we'll take it on board. The rest that are politically motivated, especially where it is laden with poison, political poison that is, we will reject it. All right. Let us continue on there.
Let me just say
Yes.
briefly, Pete, maybe at some point, in line with all of what we are discussing here, we may like to do a session on citizenship, which is outlined in our constitution too, at section 97 onward speaks of our citizenship.
True.
And that is something that is very dear to my heart as a Dominican, the manner in which people, not that I'm opposed to persons getting citizenship, Dominican citizenship. I'm not opposed to that, but it's the manner in which it is just conveyed, as you say. People just come buy a passport, show that they can make certain investment, and right away they become citizens of Dominica. Again, in the United States, where I currently reside, if you have to do at least 5 years, a minimum, that is, 5 years in the US, moving from a green card holder to become a US citizen. And it is not something you just do like that, And yes, there are other countries that have a citizen by investment program, but like I say, I think in the case of Malta, and I believe it is Turkey, you have to do at least 7 years before you get it. They will give you the privileges that you're seeking in terms of economic privileges and all of that, but in terms of actually giving you a Malta passport or a Turkey passport, it doesn't come like that, Yeah. So it's something we will at some point discuss, but I agree with you with the comments that you made earlier in response to the question raised.
Yeah, John Bernard James basically tell Clarence Christian here in writing that he's basically cherry picking the issues, and Marshall Durham backs it up by saying, Clarence like to quote what suits him. In my opinion, if one does not reside in the country, he or she should not vote. That is Marshall Durham's comment. He ends by saying they simply come, vote, and leave soon thereafter. All right.
But Lofty, I know you want to read through the feed, but let's go back again to the all-important question of the residency, which is what we are really tackling here today.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
And let us make it clear to those listening and those who will be able to share that later on, that we have to remain with our eyes and ears open, because you will recall, Lofty, was it last year before, when the government tried to slip a bit of legislation in Parliament as it related to electoral reform or amendment to the electoral reform, and the opposition was on guard? And
that was a little while back, Alvin. Time flies, in 2017. That was May of 2017,
Oh my God, that long? Jesus Christ. And had they not raised the red flag, that would have slipped under the radar. And then the government came crying foul and saying, oh, the opposition don't want reform, and look, they are going to Parliament. But we know what their intentions were. So we have to be on guard with whatever that is being proposed as it relates to that residency situation they are trying to slip in, and we should guard ourselves against it. I liked what Dr. Jeffrey indicated earlier in terms of registration. You'd have to be, for non-Dominicans, of course, you'd have to be on island for at least 4 years. I like that provision. And then, of course, we can always look at what obtains elsewhere as it relates to residency. That is not a fait accompli that because you're Dominican, you could just, feel, well, you're entitled to. While clearly we don't want to disenfranchise anyone, but there has to be, as our constitution itself recognized, there has to be some regulations in place that regulates the question of residency and domicile for purposes of being registered to vote. So that's something we have to stay on point. We have to guard it judiciously and make sure that whatever, at the end of the day, I think the fundamental thing is whatever is presented must be presented in the best interest of the people.
True.
It should not be what a political party feel that they can get an edge over the other advantage. And I think Adelaide
Paul, yes.
Adelaide Paul put it quite nicely. I mean, when a law is passed, the law is not meant to penalize one party and uphold the other. It's a law for the country. And the next government come in office will have to live by that law.
And Alvin, on that point you're making there, that is one of the basic things I've been trying to alert Dominicans about, in that when you hear the vibe on the ground about electoral reform, it seems as if there is one set of rules for the Labour Party electoral reform. There is another set of rules in terms of its meaning and its interpretation thereof for the opposition party's electoral reform. And that shouldn't be. Because you hear the Labour Party cohort saying straight up, they're talking about electoral reform in order to remove the Dominica Labour Party from government.
Exactly.
You understand? You sometimes you even get the sentiment as well from the opposition forces that with these reforms, we're going to remove the Dominica Labour Party from office. And it should not be, the messaging should not be that. The messaging should be for a much freer and fairer process. And at the end of the exercise, let the best team win. And that's it.
That's right.
No, so I believe that is where we have this sort of tug of war, and nobody wants to release for anybody because everybody wants to protect their turf, the political turf.
Absolutely. Electoral reform should not be a party thing, whether it helps the UWP or it helps the Labour Party or it's to put this party out. No, it is meant to improve on the process that we have that is not working currently. And why it's not working, as we've said, is because of the situation that we have. I mean, among the 5 different islands that have had elections in the last several months, starting with Grenada, then St. Kitts, then St. Lucia. I mean, every one of them, Dominica, electors list was inflated. You had more people on the electors list than you had the population. Dominica was the only one like that. Nowhere else.
True.
Nowhere else.
True.
Antigua, which was the last jurisdiction in the region, Antigua for a population of 90,000+ people. The electors list was just a little over 60,000. Dominica have less than 70,000, and our electors list is way past 75,000. So clearly, something is not right. And the intention is to get it right, so the people can come and have a fair exercise of their right to vote.
Yes, folks, we are looking at the time. It is 14 minutes to the hour of 8 o'clock. That means we are slowly but surely running out of time. Dr. Jeffrey, I'll be pulling you back after I read that comment, but I must read that comment here to sort of, bring to a wrap the conversation, the Canadian decision that Brother Christian mentioned before. Viva Mamo writes, Clarence Christian's point on the Canadian Supreme Court's judgment. Any decision from a Canadian court has only persuasive authority in our jurisdiction, albeit a Commonwealth state. The person writes and continues here, a Canadian judgment does not have to be followed in Dominica. As Alvin has pointed out earlier, the CCJ is our highest court. Further, any court decision is based on its particular facts, evidence, circumstances, and laws existing in the jurisdiction. The situation with the Canadian citizens living abroad is different from that of a small developing state as Dominica. I thought that point is very succinct, to the point, and it's a very intellectual one. I just thought I'd wrap up the whole Canadian aspect that was injected in there by Brother Christian with Viva Mamu's point. Dr. Jeffrey, we are slowly but surely running out of time. Anything else based on the conversation we're having you want to plug in here, sir?
Yeah, I would just like to say again that elections are the people's business. It's called Representation of the People Act. That's what it is. It is through our elections, and we assume by best practices that we elect people to our parliament to legislate, etc., etc. And so best practices must obtain. Best practices must obtain. The OECS is a region that we share lots of things in common. And so we can all look at what is it that works best within these provinces to ensure that at all times, those best practices are obtained in our electoral process. It is not the politicians' business. It is the people's business. And so the efforts of the populace ought to be garnered in such a way, in such a construct, that at the end of the day, the will of the people would prevail. So while there are political overtures, it not ought to be looked at the political party's exercise, but rather a people's exercise. And so that the involvement of the people of all persuasion ought to be solicited. So at the end of the day, we have a common approach, and so that best practices would always prevail going forward. And I have read a judgment from the CCJ in respect to what you would have mentioned earlier. And it's a fine piece of advice that is given not just to Dominica, but all of us within the region should take note as to what was said by those justices of the CCJ, even though in my country, the CCJ is not a final appellate court, but still there's something there that we can learn from going forward in our electoral process.
Yes, thank you very much, my brother, indeed. Alvin, any further points you want to elaborate on?
Well, I think our friend Dr. Jeffrey have put it quite succinctly. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, let's understand why we have elections in the first place, and what the intentions are. And it should not in any shape or form be viewed as a political or treated as a political football. And I think he put it quite right. It is meant to, it's a hallmark of a democracy. Elections, that's what it is, a hallmark of a democracy.
True. And
if for some reason that process, that electoral process is not transparent, and I always insert the word transparent. It should not just be free and fair. It must be free, fair, and transparent. And if that process is not transparent, then that's where our democracy is undermined or hijacked. And he's absolutely right. I share those views that it is something that is sacred, it's something we have to safeguard. And therefore, whatever mechanisms that we put in place at all time must be mechanisms that further uplift the people of the region. That's the intention, that we are able to elect people who put themselves forward to be of service, as the term suggests, honorable men and women, to serve us and do the right thing. And if the process does not allow for that, then we have a serious problem. And he's right as well in saying that we can learn from each other. That's the reason why we form those various alliances that we form. What are the best practices? And I think Dominica is in such a unique, but also a very good position in the sense, as I said, we are coming at the end. So there are those who have walked that walk before us, who have done it, who have seen what works and what does not work. And we're now in a better position to take all of what that works well in those jurisdictions and put it into our legislation, because they have had it and they saw what their pitfalls were. Now we can learn from that.
Yes, very well. Indeed, folks, it is 7 minutes to the hour with the clock. Let us now just There are still comments to read, but in the interest of time, we cannot go through, the rest of the comments. So we apologize to you guys profusely out there. Folks, Alvin, you used two words there that I want to really dovetail in now as we bring the conversation to a wrap. That is where we want to look at what sort of action, what sort of call to action attitude now we can adopt in Dominica, in Antigua by extension, and in our region, so that we can continue to safeguard our democracy. What Dr. Jeffrey, what are some of the things that you guys did and maybe continue to do in Antigua as it pertains to safeguarding that democracy? What sort of sacrifice that you guys, are doing as we speak? And also, Alvin, that question is to you as well. What can we do in Dominica now to drive home the point?
Yeah, Dr. Jeffrey, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Education still works. Okay, an informed electorate will always make errors, always. An uninformed electorate will always make errors. But one that is aware, I said one that is uninformed, but one that is informed will always be able to look at situations through education process and make an analysis which would be consistent with what is best for the country and not what is best for an individual. In other words, there ought not to be any advantages and or disadvantage in the cycle. Every person ought to be exposed to the same situation to come up with those best practices. And so education is still critical and will always be critical to the process. By education, like what you're doing now in the forum, that is very, very, very important. From our perspective in Antigua, the Film Fashion League, every Tuesday, we have 1 hour program on one of our radio stations here. Every Tuesday, 1 hour. And we use that as a means of educating people in terms of best practices for our electoral process. From time to time, we appear on other radio stations to basically to do the same thing. So what you're doing here will be critical going forward in your jurisprudence.
Alvin, yes.
Yeah, thank you. No, I fully endorse what Dr. Jeffrey has said as it relates to the question of education and continuing the dialogue and the conversation like we're doing on Civic Vibes and other forums. I would want to say in terms of practical stuff that we can do, we can continue to push forward what you call the collaborations that we are right now doing, to continue to collaborate, because it's always good to, as I said, to see what your neighbors are doing and to learn from that. No man is an island, as they say. So further collaboration is important. But I think also important as well is the fact, Lofty, we need to get on the ground. As I said on the last program, we need to get on the block, the guy on the street, and discuss those issues with them. Because they're the ones that eventually are going to make the decision. They're the ones that are going to be the voters voting in the elections. So it cannot be a discussion left at the level, say, only at the politicians or the intellects among us. We got to get to the ground. We got to go to the guys on the block, the young 18, 20, 25, 30-year-old young man, young woman out there in Marigot, in Portsmouth, in Grand Bay, in Roseau, St. Joseph, wherever, and discuss the issue. Hear their story too. Hear their point of view. Hear their point of view. What do they have to say about it, you know? So I think that is one way we can do that. And hopefully to continue, as Dr. Jeffrey rightly said, the education process that we're now embarking upon.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much, folks. For those of you who stayed the course with us for the entire 2-hour program, we are basically coming to an end, bringing the program to a wrap in just a bit. But before we do, let me move back to Dr. Jeffrey so that he can give you guys his final or parting words, as it were. Dr. Jeffrey, again, on behalf of the team, the Civic Vibes team, and the many folks viewing and listening, thank you very much for your time this evening again. Final words, sir.
Thank you very much, Lofty, and also Alvin. It's a pleasure for me to be here sharing with you, and I like the conversation. You know, I remember one time we were having a forum in Antigua on electoral reform, and with particular emphasis on finance campaigning. And who was one of our presenters? Your former attorney general.
Who is that? Who is that?
Mr. Bernard, what's his last name?
Bernard Wilshire?
Bernard Wilshire, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was one of the presenters at the forum we had some time ago dealing with campaign financing. So if you're able to come across him, just give her our regards from the folk in Antigua.
Yes, I will. I'm always speaking with him.
Huh?
I'm always speaking with him. So I will pass that on.
Please do. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Jeffrey. Again, we appreciate you being here with us and the information that you dispense here this afternoon. Happy evening. What is left of it, brother?
Thank you, and have a good night yourself.
All right, indeed. Thank you.
I hope we can connect physically one of these days.
Well, I'm always in Antigua these days, so you never know. You never know.
You are?
Yes.
So, well, when you give me a call, 734-7272.
I will. I have your digits, brother, for sure. Once I land back there, you will sure get a visit.
All right.
I was there for you guys' election.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Thank you indeed. Alvin, Thomas, my brother, that is the time.
I know, man. I know it's amazing how quickly the time flies by, man. But I think we've had some very good good discussion, good conversation. I think the engagement as well on the chat has been quite useful, quite interesting, even with those comments from persons we may not necessarily agree with. And that's where Civic Vibe is such a program at a much higher level, because we're not here to be disrespectful or to criticize anyone in any particular way. We are here to put the facts and to say in a very respectful way some of the comments, if we agree or disagree. I mean, like in the case of our brother, Christian, who made the point about Canada. I mean, you know, there is no comparison. I mean, you have 1% of Canada population living outside of Canada. I mean, just 1%. Compare that with Dominica, where you have, I mean, as I said a while ago, there may be more Dominicans living outside of Dominica right now than the population of Dominica. So just think of the impact that would have if you are saying now that the election should be left with Dominicans outside and not have certain, you know, requirements in place as it relates to residency and registration of electors. So it's a question again of educating the people, pointing out those, having those discussions, as I say, going on the road. But I enjoy being there. I always look forward to my Sunday, where we can engage the people on the ground and hopefully to help educate and develop and improve on the process. So yeah, you have a good week, Lofty. A very wonderful and productive week. We're soon coming to the end of the month, as I can see, March is quickly going away, moving into the Easter season. So enjoy the rest of the week, and to all our many folks online, do too have a wonderful week.
All right, Alvin, thank you very, very much indeed. Let me see a pleasant good evening as well to all of our folks who were there from the start. Some left already, but the majority, those of you still there with us, thank you for taking time up at least 2 hours from your Sunday afternoons, that is, and being part of that very informative and educative session right here on Civic Vibes on Facebook and nowadays days on YouTube as well. So yes, you have the option these days of lying on your bed and watching Civic Vibes program and hearing live on YouTube, on your big screen, wherever it is, all right? We also have the telephone numbers as well that you can call, and also the live feed to contribute. So that is it. It's already 3 minutes past the good old hour of 8 o'clock, and that is where we must turn down the curtains. We must bring down the curtains on things right here. The elderly among us, those of you who are sick and shorting at this time, we pray for you that the healing of the Almighty from your crown of your head to the sole of your feet, may that healing balm of Gilead be applied to you at this time as we go. Folks, that is it for us. See you same time, same place from 6 o'clock next week, Sunday, if the good Lord above spare us that all important breath of life. Let's do this one from Observer as we go. He entitles this one, Give Me Back My Vote.
This one is for all the politicians to take heed. I've always made it my duty to put my country first anytime it comes down to politics.
Oh, yeah.
And the party that addresses the issues and offer the people hope is the party I would always vote. But some politicians more than others does my vote with empty promises, which they know they can't and don't intend to keep. Whoa, and for 5 years we can't do nothing about it. Next time I give my support to government, I will demand a mutual agreement. I'll assign my vote to you on a contract, and if you can't do the work, I'll take my vote back. Oh, you promise industry, you lie, and prosperity, you lie, accountability, you lie, you make a fool of me, you lie. This is no joke. Take back all the damn promises and give me back my vote. 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 We trade a promise for a vote. You couldn't keep it. You wrecked my hope, so now I have to rock your boat. Give me back my vote. 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 Oh God. Die, 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 die. I'm so fed up of this system, politicians and all their lies, always making your own hand shoot finger in your eyes. And then when they get into power, they acting just like a dictator, doing worse than the governments before. And when they're in opposition, they know all government corruption, but in their own party they never know what's going on. Whoa, and if you talk, you'll be surprised to see how you're victimized. We have to make politicians be aware. It's we who paying them to run our affair. But when they get exposed, they never admit. They're always looking into it. Oh, you promise employment, you lie, and development, you lie, honest government, you lie, now show me the betterment, you lie. This is no joke. Take back all your damn promises and give me back my vote. 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 We trade a promise for a vote. You couldn't keep it. You killed my hope, so now I have to rock your boat. Give me back my vote. 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 Die, 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 die. Then they want to fool us and rule us and give secret deals to make your friends prosperous. We want ministers to walk in tongue, keep in touch with the common man, and remember who put him in his position. But you know, all they does is travel, spending and come back with nothing. They must deal prudently with the country's money. Whoa, that's responsibility and accountability. Next time you see election time coming, my contract will be ready and waiting. Then I won't have to put on no badge of ignorance when I vote again next time. Oh, you promise progress. You lie. No, we in a mess. You lie. Well, if that's your best, you lie. Then I must confess. You lie. This is no joke. Take back all your damn promises and give me back my vote. 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 We trade a promise for a vote. You couldn't keep it. You wrecked my hope, so now I have to rock your boat. Give me back my vote. 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 Oh God, I like it. But this is serious. This is no joke. Fed up. Oh la la. Hey la la. Oh la la. For this industry, you lie. And prosperity, you lie. Accountability, you lie. You make a fool of me, you lie. This is no joke. Take back all the damn promises and give me back my vote. Give me back my vote.